another exciting episode on the show, Keeping Secrets in Books. I'm so happy to have you guys here today. And as always, you guys know we only bring the best of guests to the show. Take out our time and go out there and sort out for the best guests to bring for you guys on the show. And once again, today we have a very, very special guest. Today's guest is Cheyenne. Cheyenne is a motivational speaker, cancer survivor, and above knee amputee, counseling trainee, and passionate advocate for resilience and hope. After facing childhood cancer, limb loss, and chronic illness, Cheyenne has transformed her life and lived experiences into a mission to help others navigate adversity with courage, humor, and purpose. Combining personal insights with her graduate training in counseling, she encourages people to build resilience, rediscover their identity, and live beyond survival. Cheyenne, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, thank you so much. So, I hope you enjoyed that introduction.
Yeah, it was really good. Thank you.
All right, so I have some questions here for you, and I would like us to get into them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so can you take us back to your childhood and share what your journey through cancer was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So this all started when I was about 13 years old. I had some issues over the course of a summer with knee pain. And at first we were like, oh, I probably twisted my knee or something. I had been at a summer camp for 3 weeks. It was pretty reasonable to assume I just managed to injure myself. The issue was the pain never really went away. It just fluctuated and eventually started getting worse and worse. And then I also had this swelling that just would not go down no matter what we tried. And so eventually we were like, okay, this is a problem. Clearly something's wrong. Let's go see an orthopedist, right? Get it looked at. And so my grandma takes me to see her orthopedist. And I explain all my symptoms to him. And he says he pretty much has an idea of what it is, but he wants to just get some x-rays to confirm. We're like, okay, he's probably thinking I really tore something in there and I'm probably going to need surgery, right? We get the x-rays, come back in the room. He puts them up on the view box because this was back when you had to put all the films up on the big light boxes. And I look and I know immediately something is wrong because my knees don't look the same on the x-rays. If you've ever seen an x-ray, you know that bones are very clearly defined. And on my right knee, it was very fuzzy. And then he points to that exact spot and he says, this is an aggressive tumor and it's possibly cancerous. And I remember my entire world being swept out from under me at that point because I was 13 years old and I had barely thought about what I wanted to do next year in school, let alone confront my own mortality at the idea of I have cancer. And so I was rushed into an MRI that night to get a better look at what was going on. And then literally the following week, I was in with an orthopedic surgeon getting a biopsy done. And sure enough, it came back as osteosarcoma, which is a pediatric bone cancer. And given the size of my tumor, it was pretty bad. So that surgeon rushed us over to the hospital that he partnered with, the oncologist he partnered with. And within the span of a month, let's say this whole sequence took a month, I was in the hospital with a newly installed port, getting ready to start my first round of chemo. And it was hard. The chemos are unfortunately notorious, especially the ones I was getting for my osteosarcoma, are notorious for being just destructive. One of them is quite literally nicknamed, I found out later, the Red Devil, because it's considered one of the most toxic chemos that we have. I got chemo for 10 weeks, and the plan was 10 weeks of chemo, and then we would go in and do a partial femur full knee replacement. So take out the tumor, which was above my knee, take out my knee because it was too close to risk leaving it in for risk of like leaving cancer cells, and then replace it with metal components. The surgeon comes out halfway through to talk to my dad, and he tells my dad that the tumor was wrapped around my femoral artery, which is the biggest blood supply in your leg. And he says the odds are that it's still alive and we're going to end up needing to amputate. Now, my surgeon was a great guy, and I credit this a lot with how I handled everything. He did not immediately rush into doing the amputation. He wanted to check. So he took the tumor out, put in a spacer, which is literally just a piece of medical concrete that they use to hold everything in place since the bone's not there anymore. And then they tested the tumor because he was like, if we're going to do this, I want to know for sure that there's absolutely no other options, right? That it is still alive. So this is a Tuesday. He comes back the Friday and says, yeah, it's still alive. Basically, the outer edge of it had been killed by the chemo, but we suspect because the blood supply was so strong, it just was able to fight off the chemo doing any more damage. And so he sat me and my dad down, but mostly sat me down. And he was like, we have two options. We can go through with the original operation, but it's going to double the chances the cancer spreads to your lungs because we're not going to be able to guarantee we get everything out. And with osteosarcoma, that's basically kind of considered a death sentence because osteosarcoma loves to go to your lungs as a secondary site. Or we can amputate, and this will give you the best odds that we get everything and it's not going to come back. And so I just turned 14 years old. I made the decision to amputate my leg above the knee on the right side. And so the following Tuesday, he goes in, the bone's already gone. So he just goes in, finishes everything off. And I wake up partially disabled. Now, if he hadn't let me be part of that decision-making process, I am sure that I would not have handled it nearly as well as I did. Because basically I was like, all right, bet we're gonna take care of this. And so I was out of the hospital like 4 days later. They were like, yep, you can go home because I was up and moving. As soon as we got my stitches taken out, we went to schedule with a prosthetist so I could get started working on that. And at the same time, I'm doing post-chemo, which is very common with osteosarcoma treatment. You do another sequence of chemo afterwards to make sure you got every single little cancer cell that might still be in your body. And so it was kind of the same old, while also trying to deal with learning how to use a prosthetic and all that until basically a year had gone by this point. So we went from September of one year to October the next year. I finished my last round of chemo. I'd started high school at this point, so I'm doing chemotherapy on top of starting my first semester at my high school. And I finally get the all clear of, okay, you're done. You did all the chemo. Now we just watch and wait and hope that it did what it needed to. And so that's kind of the story of that first time dealing with the cancer.
All right, Cheyenne, thank you so much. That was emotional to listen to, although, but I definitely enjoyed that one, your story. So you often say that disability is part of your story, but not your identity. Can you explain that for us?
Absolutely. So I think the distinction comes from the fact that, like, my identity is not what has been done to me. It is who I choose to be. Now, does a lot of that come from what's happened to me? Yeah, that is true. But I think they're two very distinct things. So, like, this is such a good question. I haven't been asked this specifically before. I don't want the only thing that I'm known for to be having gone through all of this pain, right? And it's not just the cancer. It's childhood abuse when I was younger. It's dealing with parental loss. It's dealing with this recurrence I've just had. Like, if the only thing you knew about me was what I've been through, my story, you would make a lot of assumptions about who I am as a person. Probably not bad assumptions, but assumptions nonetheless. I have done a lot of work to get to a point where those parts of my story no longer feel like they're impacting my day-to-day life. And I'm very proud of that work that I've done. And so when I think about who I am, I choose to focus on that work I've done instead of directly the things that have happened to me, because that work and that growth is far more important to me than the literal fact that I have been through so much in my life.
Hey, thank you so much, Chen. So, uh, humor is a big part of your message, honestly. What role has laughter played in helping you cope with life's hardest moments?
So, when this was kind of all originally going on, and especially after the amputation, my dad kind of said something. He said, if you can laugh about it, you're probably doing okay. And I kind of ended up taking that to heart, probably a little too quickly. I started going, well, if I can make jokes about the fact that I'm disabled, I must be doing pretty okay. And so that was the way, like, me and my family kind of dealt with it, is we would joke about stuff. Uh, there was one time early on where we were all in the car together, and I said, quite reasonably, my foot's cold, because I only have the one. And my sister was like, don't you mean feet? And I turned around and I, like, stared at her, and I was like, no, my foot's cold. And then we were all, like, laughing because she was like, oh yeah, that's right. And it was just one of those funny things where we were like, you know, we're all getting used to this. And so I didn't mean it with any maliciousness. It was just funny. This kind of carried over when I started high school, because people are really uncomfortable with disability a lot of the times. I learned very quickly. And especially teenagers are very awkward when you've got the disabled, clearly cancer patient coming into your class, and you're like, are they okay? Can I even talk to them? Do they need me to leave them alone? And I didn't want to deal with all that awkwardness. So I just started cracking lots of jokes very early on as I was meeting people. And I found that those jokes disarmed people in such a way that it made them realize, okay, I can talk to this girl. She's cool. She's okay with me talking about it. Right? And then that kind of ended up becoming the thing I was known for in high school. I wouldn't say I was a class clown, because I knew when was the appropriate time to joke. But I definitely became known for taking a humorous spin on things. The issue came later, as I was starting to struggle a bit more with my mental health, and eventually ended up in therapy. I realized that I was using the humor to mask what I was feeling instead of, like, dealing with it. The humor was just a way to cover it up. And so I had to put in a lot of work and self-exploration to find a way to reincorporate humor into my life so that I wouldn't ignore what I was feeling, but instead maybe use the humor as a way to alleviate a little bit of the pain, acknowledge it instead of shove it away. And so nowadays, I do still crack a lot of jokes, but it's more of a tactical sort of, this moment really sucks, let's lighten it up a little bit. We're not going to forget that this moment sucks. But the humor just kind of lightens the air a little bit so we can talk about it instead of feeling weighed down by everything that's happening or everything that has happened. And humor in my professional life, both as a speaker and as a counseling student, is a way to still build connection. It's a way to kind of disarm and be like, look, I know that you're probably like, oh, this girl's so young. Why is she disabled? Like, what the heck's happening? Like, it's fine. It sucks. It absolutely does suck. but I'm here and I want to share this with you. And so I'm going to crack this joke to show you I'm okay talking about it. And then it's especially nice as a counselor because especially with kids love cracking jokes. And so it just builds that kind of relationship and makes you feel more human in a space that is inherently so vulnerable for somebody.
Okay, Jen, so how do you help people who feel like trauma or illness has stolen their sense of identity?
The honest answer is I'm still working on it myself, and so I bring a lot of honesty to the table. I explain, like, look, this is not something I figured out overnight. This is something that has taken me years and years and years to get to a point where I feel like I sort of have an understanding, right? But this is a journey that we're all going on, that I'm still going on. I just offer to bring people along for the ride, right? To be kind of that space where you've got questions, I can tell you what I've been through, and hopefully that'll give you some answers. The big thing that I've learned, especially recently over the last few years, is just the idea that, like, we are more than just resilient or just strong for what we've gone through, right? That's the word everybody gravitates towards. You're brilliant, you're strong, you're resilient, you're inspirational, right? Because we're trying to make meaning out of these things that have happened, right? Especially other people. Other people hate seeing suffering with no purpose. And so that's a lot of the, not feedback, but the words you get is you're so resilient for going through this. You're so strong. You're so inspirational. The problem is, at least in my experience, that you can end up clinging to that idea so hard that you forget about all these other parts of yourself and you become kind of consumed by the things that have happened to you because we're trying to make meaning out of it. I only started feeling free of what happened to me when I started asking myself, I'm resilient, and what else am I? And it sounds so simple to just add a little and there, but mentally speaking, it was really hard. That is a very fundamental mindset change that I had to implement with myself to start building the flexibility to see I am strong and resilient, and I also need help. I am a cancer patient and I am a counseling student. Remembering that there is far more to me outside of whatever one part of my trauma or disability or chronic illness is currently trying to take control. And it's, again, something I am still working on implementing every single day because it's hard sometimes. There are days where I'm absolutely exhausted and all I can think about is I wish my body didn't feel this way. But on those days, it's even more important for me to remember who I am outside of my illness and my disability, because if I didn't, I'd probably just lay in bed being depressed, being completely honest. But instead, I look at myself and I go, I am feeling this way. I am chronically ill. And I am also still a person. And I know if I just sit here, I'm going to be miserable. And so that's kind of the big message I've been sharing about my journey, because I feel like it's something I wish someone had kind of pointed out to me when I was younger.
All right, Jen, thank you so much. The story is so fascinating and inspiring to listen to, and I'm sure my audience can take a bit of courage from this. So, what message would you give to someone who is facing a life-changing diagnosis or major setback today?
I think the message I would give them is the world is going to try and do things to you all the time, but you are always in control of how you respond to it and how you move forward. And again, this is something that I've spent the last 13 years of my life, I think, working on getting better at, because I absolutely sucked at thinking this way in the very beginning. It was always like, what's the point in trying anything because the world's just going to screw me over. But a fundamental thing I kind of learned in therapy was that we are not our thoughts and feelings. We are how we choose to respond to them. And so that kind of stuck with me really hard and ended up becoming kind of a universal experience of, okay, if I'm not my thoughts and my feelings and I am how I respond to them, then I am not the traumas and things that happen to me. I am how I respond to those. And in a way, it's adding a bit of control to something that inherently you really have no control of. Like, sure, you're not really going to be able to change the fact that you were diagnosed with this or the fact that you had this traumatic experience happen. It has happened. But knowing you have the power to make choices for yourself about how you're going to keep moving forward is inherently such a powerful message that I think gets lost sometimes when we're in the middle of it. And so I think it's an important message to repeat over and over and over again, because at some point somebody is going to be in the middle of something awful and they're going to hear that and it's going to make a huge difference for them.
All right, Jen, thank you so much. So I still have a couple more questions for you because I just like to listen to you speaking and talking about this. So, how can friends and families better be of support to someone facing a major health challenge without being overprotective?
Learn to be a better listener. And that's not calling anybody out saying, like, people just don't want to listen, right? The thing I learned in counseling school is that listening, true active listening, is a skill that can be developed. And it's not something you need to go to counseling school for, okay? You can look up active listening skills on the internet. But it's not something that we inherently know how to do as people. And so a lot of the times, at least from my experience, what I needed in the moment was not feedback, was not solutions, or anything of that sort, like actionable stuff. It was just I needed somebody to sit there and really listen to me about what was going on. And so if you are looking for ways to support your loved one, practice active listening. Practice being able to actually sit there and really engage in what your loved one is telling you. Because in the end, when you show that you're really taking the time to sit there and focus on them and their feelings and what they're going through, that is going to mean so much more to them than just about anything else. And it's super easy to practice and implement. Anybody can do it. So active listening skills, very important, very foundational in having a good relationship and conversation amidst kind of these really hard times.
Okay, Jen, thank you so much. I really hope people can start treating people, families can show better support because most times people get tired when they see that they become so overprotective and the person begins to feel a sense of like a burden to them. So, looking ahead, what impact do you hope to make through your work as a counselor, speaker, and advocate?
I've always kind of said, and I'm sure I have bigger goals than this, but I've always kind of said, if I find even one person who feels seen by what I'm sharing with the world, that is always enough for me. Because at its core, when I was a kid, that was the issue, was I felt like there was nobody who could really understand what it was like to have gone through all of this trauma at such a young age. On a bigger scope, I hope to bring more awareness to the impact that these kind of repeated, extensive traumatic events can have on people, and how it is drastically different to have something like pediatric cancer or child abuse, where this isn't a one-time thing and then it's over. And that is not to discount one-time traumatic events. My point is that when you have traumatic experiences that last over months or years, they are fundamentally going to impact a person in different ways than a traditional, like, traumatic event might. And this is sort of starting to come up in the research as CPTSD, but it hasn't been like formally recognized in the DSM or anything yet. But the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that this is what I've experienced. That all of my traumatic experiences lasted for so long that it's inherently changed the way that my system works biologically, like, for good. My system just works differently than other people's. And so I hope that by sharing my personal experiences and gaining professional knowledge to be able to then go and maybe even specialize in treating these kinds of cases, that I'm able to bring more awareness to this such that it gets more exposure, gets more research, and gets more support. So that way, in the long run, maybe less kids will end up dealing with such extensive long-term issues related to these traumatic experiences, because we know that they will have issues and we're targeting them from the get-go when we know there's an issue.
This has been so, so wonderful. Thank you so, so much. And I really hope wish you success in your work. Thank you for sharing so much, for sharing for sharing your incredible story with us. The honesty, resilience, and ability to find hope and humor through life's greatest challenges are truly inspiring. We have reminded us that while adversity may shape our journey, it doesn't have to define who we become. We wish you continued success in your counseling career, your advocacy, and your mission to help others move beyond survival and embrace a life filled with purpose. Thank you, Cheyenne, for joining us today on this wonderful episode.
Thank you so much again for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, so for those who want to connect with you and know more about what you do, how can they do that?
Absolutely. You can either go to my website, which is just CheyenneHeflin.com, or you can follow me on either Instagram or TikTok. I am at resilient_AKA, and I'm sharing kind of my journey over the next year as I'm waiting to go back to school and recovering from my cancer recurrence. So exciting things up ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. And to my audience, thank you so much. And keep listening to Control or Be Controlled. And if this episode is speaking to you, try and share it with someone out there who needs to hear this. I will see you guys on the next episode.